Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Area Plans East on Wednesday, the 1st of March 2023. My name is Heather Brady, and on my left, I've got Vivian, who's the secretary, and on my right, I've got Graham Courtney, who's our planning officer, and Natalie, in charge of all the IT further on. Thank you. Further down. I just have to read out about the webcasting. I'd remind everybody present that this hybrid meeting will be broadcast live to the internet or filmed and will be capable of repeated viewing or other such by third parties. Therefore, by participating in this meeting, you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. If any public speakers on Zoom do not wish to have their image captured, then they should ensure that their video setting throughout the meeting is turned off and set to audio only. Please also be aware that if technical difficulties interrupt the meeting that cannot be overcome, I may need to adjourn the meeting. I shall be a voting chairman tonight. I presume advice has been given to the public and the speakers.
Yes, Chairman.
Thank you. Could we have apologies for absence, please?
I've received apologies from Councillors Hadley, Macready, Stalker and Rolfe. And
obviously at this point I'd just like to draw people's attention to the very sad news that one of our members, Brian Rolfe, died last Saturday. It's a great shock to us all. He's been a very well respected and much loved councillor for the last 16 years and was chairman and held all sorts of high positions within the council. He was a fantastic fellow, everybody's best friend, and we'll miss him enormously, but we respect all the work that he's done for us over the years. Now, as you'll see, I'm up here on my own. I'm being chairman tonight. So I would like to have somebody else beside me, just in case, to be my assistants. So is everybody agreed that if I ask Councillor Kesker to come beside me, that would be all right? Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Whitbread.
Yeah, thank you. Chairman, on item 10, non-pecuniary interest. My apologies, I was being too quick this evening. On item 10, the same declarations I've made previously. It's a non-pecuniary interest in that I think many years ago my company may have sold a property for the applicant's daughter. So it's a very non-pecuniary, and I will stay and I will be voting.
Thank you. Anybody else? No. Now, there's been number 5, the minutes. There's been a problem here. I don't know how many of you noticed. Good, there's a few nodding heads. There was a mistake here. Vivian is usually amazingly proficient, but we've got the wrong date and the wrong minutes, so we can't agree to them tonight, and next time we'll have 2 sets of minutes to agree to. So apologies about that. I presume there's no other business? No?
None, Chairman.
Thank you. So moving on to number 7. This is just for...
Chairman,
sorry,
could I raise something under...
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Number 6, I would just like to mention that at Ongar, in the car park at Banson's Lane, being terribly green, we have put in electric charging points. In fact, we're so green that we've torn down a lot of hedging to get them in. And in the conservation area, we have managed to put an electrical substation in full view of everyone and right next to the historic buildings. And I'm sure that the planning officer will have a comment on that.
Okay.
The only comment that I can have is that there was planning permission applied for and given for the electric charging points in that car park.
So we're carrying on with tonight. Number 8, site visits. Did anybody want any site visits for either of the 2 cases tonight? No. So then we move on, please, Mr. Courtney, to the first application.
Thank you, Chairman. So this application relates to a 2-storey side extension and single-storey rear extension. It is before committee due to an objection from the Town Council, who are speaking tonight. The application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions. Unfortunately, there appears to have been a mix-up with the Town Council comments, so the wrong comments are actually stated within the report, so apologies for that. The correct objection is shown here. I'm not going to expect you to... Oh, you could probably read it on that large screen, not on the smaller one. But basically, the Town Council object to the overdevelopment of the proposal and the effect on the street scene due to the loss of the arch. They also raise concerns about the loss of T7, T8 and T9, which are 3 trees proposed for removal. These trees here, these 2 here, and this one at the rear here. It should be noted that the Tree and Landscape Officer has raised no objection subject to the planting of a replacement tree. Unfortunately, it appears that the relevant conditions have also been missed off the suggested list. So I would add that we will also suggest 2 further conditions to those stated in the agenda. One, to ensure that tree protection is installed as submitted. It actually can be seen here, some tree protection here at the rear and tree protection at the front. And also to require details of and the planting of a replacement tree for this tree at the rear, which is a fairly good specimen that we'd like to see replaced. But apologies for those mistakes in the report. These photographs show the existing site. So at the top here, we've got the relationship between the dwelling there and the neighbour. Here is the arch referred to by the Town Council, although there's also a second arch on the other side. Down here, this is the application site. This would be the location of the proposed side extension. And finally, this here is a picture of the existing rear of the property. This shows the existing elevations. The 2 existing archways can be seen here and here. There's also an existing balcony to the rear, which would be removed as part of this application. This shows the proposed elevations. The 2-storey side extension would be stepped in at the front, just here, and would be set off the side boundary and would be subservient in appearance. The rear extension would be flat roofed and would replace the existing conservatory. Although patio doors are proposed at 1st floor level, there is no proposed roof terrace, and a condition is suggested restricting use of the rear extension for that purpose. This shows the existing floor plan. This is the proposed floor plan. As can be seen, the side extension would replace the detached garage. The layout at the rear is a little bit more contemporary, but it would not extend beyond the existing conservatory. It would be stepped away from both side boundaries. No objections have been received by any neighbours, and it's not considered that there would be any harm caused as a result of the proposal. This is a sketch street scene. So the proposal is considered to be appropriately designed and in keeping with the street scene. It should be noted that the neighbour seen here, or just seen here, was originally identical to the existing house on the application site, but does benefit from its own 2-storey side extension, which was approved way back in 1968. Whilst obviously some trees are proposed for removal, none of these are preserved, and there's no objection from the Tree and Landscape Officer. As such, the application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions, including the 2 additional conditions mentioned here. Back to you, members.
And we have 2 speakers on this. So the first is Councillor Christine Burgess from Epping Town Council. You have 3 minutes, thank you.
Good evening. As you all know, Epping Town Council has always been forward-looking while keeping an eye on our heritage and protecting our environment. We work closely with District Council, but we object to this application for the following reasons. We feel this proposal is overdevelopment and will affect the street scene, from the loss of the arch, which is a feature of the row of 3 houses on this part of Hemnald Street. It may be that you think this is not an important architectural feature, but we are trying to preserve the town as it is, whilst obviously moving forward, as I've said. The committee are also concerned about the felling and removal of the T7 crabapple, T8 pine and T9 cedar trees to facilitate the development, which is listed in the tree report provided. Committee commented that this is a leafy street and the loss of 3 trees will have a detrimental effect on the street scene.
Thank you. And the second speaker via Zoom is Scott Buckley, the applicant. Good evening. Just about.
I'll try and speak out as much as possible. Firstly, I'd like to thank you for your time. My name is Scott Buckley, and along with my mum, we own 55 Hemnald Street. As a family, we've lived in Hemnald Street for 37 years, and we're an integral part of the Epping community. I'd like to start by explaining the reasons for applying for planning changes. My mum is aging now, and we need more permanent care. And my wife and I currently work abroad. We wish to spend more time with mum as carers, meaning more space requirement for us to return from overseas and work, from our overseas work, to reside with mum along with our 2 daughters. So also with mobility decreasing, mum will eventually require ground floor bedroom and bathroom. We feel that the property has an important architectural role in the community. We've always been very proud of the property, and it's typical of the Hemnald Street locality. As such, it's highly important that we maintain the same look to the feel of the property, landscape and driveway, while allowing more space to be added internally. Most properties within the same development in Hemnald Street have had site extensions over the years, and we feel that our extension proposal is modest and synthetic. We have taken into account the planning officer's requests to set off the boundary line and reduce the footprint of the proposed extension accordingly. We also note the recent comment regarding the effect on the street scene, the loss of the archway, which is a feature of the row of 3 houses in this part of Hemnald Street. And although it's not shown on the submitted plans, we now, due to your comments, we now intend to add a mirror arch to the right side of the proposed street-facing elevation, so that it continues the appearance as requested. As a family, there's been much love and attention given to the garden and landscaping at home, and the requirement to remove some smaller trees to enable the proposed extension has been carefully put through. As such, Epping Town Council is concerned about the felling and removal of the T7, T8 and T9 trees to facilitate the development noted. And we will, of course, be replaced with the same thought and attention in similar sized trees. Should there be any specific requirements for replacements or arch addition from this committee, we'd be more than happy to take these requests on board. And that's my comments over and done with.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So, members, over to you. I don't know how much of that you caught. I could just about hear it all, but it was a bit difficult. Yes, Councillor Whitehouse.
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, there's 2 main issues been raised with this, aren't there? First, there's the extension itself, and then there's the trees. I mean, clearly, it's quite a large extension, but it is a reasonably large plot. And as far as I can see, the extension doesn't, go markedly, beyond, the line of the neighbouring houses or the existing conservatory, and it's designed at the back, to be away from the neighbouring garden. And I also note, it's set in from the boundaries, which all helps in terms of not, crowding the plot. The trees issue, I just wanted to clarify something about, because I have some sympathy with the importance of the trees to the street scene there. I think we heard Mr. Courtney say the replacement tree was to replace the tree at the back, which is the low-value crabapple, rather than the trees at the front, which obviously have greater public amenity value, because they are more publicly visible. And I just wondered about the logic of that, and if you could explain that a bit more, because it seems to me that the replacements are more important at the front.
Yep, sure. I think usually we would certainly agree. I think with the front trees, there is already a very large tree which is being retained, and that is the key tree at that front. That is the one that adds the amenity value and the visual impact. Actually, I'd almost argue that you almost don't even notice the trees behind because of that very large tree. Obviously, the two smaller trees that are coming out are actually quite close to the house anyway, so you're not going to get much more than a small tree like they are there. I mean, technically speaking, they probably don't have to come out. I think they've been suggested to be removed because they are U category trees, so they're poor quality trees. But they could actually remain, by the looks of things, or certainly be replaced with a similar tree if members were minded to do so. But certainly our tree and landscape officers and the planning officers don't particularly think that's necessary, given the existing very large tree at the front, which obviously we would want kept, we do want protected, and we would certainly, and I believe is TPO'd as well. So.
Janet Whitehouse, please.
No, just
No?
Councillor Mackay.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Mackay next.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't particularly have many objections, because it seems to me that some of the matters raised can be mitigated, tree planting, etc. The only comment I was going to make is on the conditions of the application. When I saw the visual of what the site would look like afterwards, it is clearly a much larger building. It almost has the appearance of flats or to that nature. I just wondered if a condition could be included, if members were mindful, to ensure this only remains, the house that it would be, and then it couldn't become a house of, multiple units, nor could it be split into two and be two separate dwellings, because I'm aware that in that part of the world there isn't a huge amount of space for parking and stuff.
Certainly subdivision into 2 units would require planning permission. Subdivision into flats would require planning permission. So there wouldn't be any need to do that. The only thing that obviously could be undertaken without planning permission is the subdivision into, or the change of use into HMO, small HMOs up to, well, certainly up to 6 people is within C3 use. And C4 use, so yeah, up to 6 people could be, which is the right for any householder. If there's reasoning behind needing to restrict that here, then a condition could be suggested to remove that permitted development right. It's essentially I can't remember off the top of my head, but we can obviously make sure it's in there. There's a certain part of the GPDO that allows for that change of use. We can restrict to that if that's deemed necessary, but we would have to have reason why this house couldn't, but the next door house could, for example.
And I would just add to that, if you look at what it says at the bottom of page 27, it says they're not even asking for an increase in the number of bedrooms. So I'm assuming that isn't going to be happening, and they would have to apply for planning permission if they wanted to subdivide it. So I think we really just look at what's in front of us. Councillor Janet Whitehouse now, please.
Thank you. I did have some difficulty in hearing the applicant speak, but I think he did say that he was willing to replace trees in the front. And yes, I would just say I would welcome that, and how important it is to keep the leafy appearance of the street. So maybe the trees are there are not the best ones to keep, but if new ones are planted in the front garden, it would make a big difference to the road. We see so many front gardens being completely paved and so barren that I hope it will remain like a garden. And also, having had experience, we've all had experience recently of applications, I would just like to stress how important it is that this extension is built to the plan that we approve this evening, if we do approve it, and if any changes need to be made, that they come back to council for the council to agree. So I'm sure the applicant will follow that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bedford. Sorry, do you want to reply?
Oh, sorry, there you go. I was just going to very quickly come back. Yes, absolutely. Again, members are welcome to take a vote on it. But the suggested condition about the replacement tree was that it actually, so reading this, unusually the comments say about one tree, but the suggested condition actually does say replacement trees, plural. So certainly we can, we can have all three of the trees have to be replaced and details of those to be submitted. So that would be very, very easy if members are minded to do that. And just in terms of, obviously, I'm not sure if there's much to say about building in accordance with plans. Obviously, we would hope the same. It's slightly worrying when there was mention that they're already looking at changing that front to put the arch in, because obviously that's not in front of us. We don't have that on a plan. But again, the applicant's online, so he can hear us having this discussion, and yeah, I'm sure that any such change they will come and discuss with us and get any necessary approval.
Thank you. Councillor Bedford.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, on looking at the plans and reading through this earlier on today, and now seeing the picture that was put up, perhaps Mr Courtney could get that up again, of the final picture, which was the artist impression of the street scene. I do think that it brings a bit of balance to the properties. When you look at the property on the right-hand side, then you look at the one next to it. I'm not overly worried about the removal of the arch. We've still got one the other side. And I think it looks more balanced now when you compare the roof lines and the buildings going forward. I do think that the previous arch was covered up considerably by overgrown ivy, etc., and that really diminished from the fact that if you were looking at that in the street scene scenario, you wouldn't have seen the arch anyway, so I'm not worried about the arch. What I did think about was that the trees, I think you've already suggested, Mr Courtney, that the trees actually looked like they were too close to the building, which may have caused some issues with underpinning in the future or problems with foundations. So I'm not overly worried about the actual trees being reinstated. Perhaps one in the back garden, which has been agreed, and if we have to have one in the front, something small that's very, very slow growing and well away from the building, if it has to be. Regarding the parking status, I think in the assessment it already says that it's above the Essex average parking standards for this, and that 3 allocated spaces have already been made available. So on balance, I think that this application should be supported. Thank you.
Is there anybody else that would like to say anything? Well, Mr Courtney, could we go back to the photograph? I think what we're finding out is that we're sort of quite happy about the house, but wondering about trees. So could we just say, yes, look at that, because I actually drove past there today to look at the situation with the trees. There isn't actually a picture. Is there not one of it further away with the huge tree that's in the front garden? It doesn't actually show that as I was driving along, this house has more trees in its front garden than anybody else's. It's got trees down both sides. Trees, I could hardly see the house for trees. And I assumed that the problem was this enormous, is it an ash tree? I don't know what the tree is in the front garden, a huge tree. And I didn't even notice these other little 2 trees that apparently are going to, oh, that's better, okay. But can that put that in context now? You see the size of the tree. And I don't where these 2 little trees are that are somewhere nearer the house. Yeah, possibly those. So, yeah, I think they may cause trouble as they're so near to the building. The big tree, there's no debate, that's staying. And they've already agreed to replace the crabapple in the back garden. So, personally, I'm quite happy with what's been suggested by the planning officers. Councillor Whitehouse again.
So I think you may just, I was going to say we don't need to delve too much in the weeds into this because the condition does say that full details of replacement trees should be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. And that will allow the tree officer to ensure that an appropriate replacements are put in place. I don't think we want to act as substitute tree officers ourselves.
Yes, I agree. Councillor Phillip?
No, change his mind. No.
All right, okay. So we heard earlier that there's going to be a couple of additional conditions anyway because of they were forgotten. So with the additional conditions, can we go to the vote? All those in favour, please show.
Unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you. So that planning has been passed. Thank you. Sorry, with the extra conditions, yeah. Right, so moving on. So the next planning application is Tilegate Farm for a lake pond. Mr. Courtney.
Thank you, Chairman. So this application relates to the construction of a natural pond and landscaping on a parcel of land adjacent to the former Tilegate Farm. The application is before committee due to an objection from the parish council and an adjacent landowner. The proposal would provide a pond that would be integrated with the surface water drainage system and would offer additional attenuation of rainwater runoff from the adjacent site that is currently being developed for residential purposes. The proposal is outside of the adjacent residential development site and the residential curtilage of the adjacent dwelling, which is this one here. A condition is suggested restricting the use of the site to protect it from being incorporated into the neighbour's garden, which actually would require consent, or for being used for any commercial purposes. The proposal includes additional landscaping. Whilst the Tree and Landscape Officer has requested further information, they do accept that the details of the proposed landscaping can be dealt with by condition, and that's suggested. Detail has been provided with regards to the proposed land levels, and a condition is suggested regarding any importation or exporting of materials. So this is the existing land levels and this is the proposed. This shows another level change plan for the site. Much of the objections received relate to the history of the wider site and what is or isn't shown in the blue line area, including a tennis court that is shown outside of the approved curtilage, just here. None of these matters are relevant to the application in front of us today. It is correct that the red line application site only encompasses this parcel of land, since this is not part of the residential site and will be conditioned as such. Although it is useful when assessing the application to have the adjacent development accurately shown, this does not impact on the proposal or the conclusions reached. Ultimately, what is being proposed is a pond on a greenfield site within the greenbelt. It would not constitute inappropriate development. It would provide an appropriate and attractive feature to this otherwise undeveloped site and would provide improved drainage and ecological enhancements. Conditions are suggested to control the use and development of the pond, and subject to these, the development is considered to be acceptable and is therefore recommended for approval. Messed up the rest at the end there, sorry, apologies. Approval, definitely approval. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 3 people speaking on this. So the first one is the objector, Jim Padfield, in person. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. May I start by saying that It was suggested last time the Tilegate meeting, the application came up, that I had some vendetta against the owner. That is not the case. My objection is the way the council has handled these applications, over 20 now in the last 5 years on this site. It's nothing to do at all with the owner of the site. I also, on this occasion, actually congratulate the officer concerned because he has taken notice of our objections, and many of the objections we put in at the time, specifically on this pond, have been changed. The plans have been changed, the conditions have come in to protect our concerns. But my further concern is that this applicant takes no notice of conditions. Absolutely no notice of conditions. The two houses that were built on this site, they were built for over 2 years before he applied for confirmation of colours and details and external finishes. Those details in those built houses were rejected by the council officers after they were put in 2 years later, and there's a history of conditions not being complied with on this site. So bear that in mind, although I congratulate the officer concerned for taking notice of what we said, those conditions I suspect will not be adhered to, and this will effectively be part of the garden of the mansion house, 9,000 square feet of mansion house that's going to be built on this site. I'm also concerned that this pond sits within a bund made out of contaminated material that was brought to the site during the lockdown. We didn't count them all, but we counted at least 72 lorry loads of contaminated material that was brought to this site. All that contaminated material has now got to be moved to do this pond. There's never been a contamination report on this site. I've done 3 farmyard conversions. I've had to do contamination reports big enough for, that big. Tens of thousands of pounds worth of contamination reports. Not one has been done on this site. Last time this site came up for discussion, which was back in October, this committee was refused permission to talk about anything other than the specific item on that thing, you remember. So one specific item, it's all you talk about. But the issue of drainage was not talked about, and the drainage issue here is not talked about. There is no drainage plan on this site, and there continues to be no drainage plan on this site, and that's unacceptable. So I've run out of time now, but the way this has been handled by this council is just not acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Padfield. And the next speaker is Councillor Michelle Hall from Morton, Bobbingworth and the Lavers Parish Council via Zoom. Now, given we had such trouble hearing the last person, perhaps if Michelle Hall could shout loudly into her speech.
I shall do my best.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm representing Morton, Bobbingworth and the Lavers Parish Council's objection to plan reference EPF 288322. This relates to the land adjacent to Tollgate Farm, Tollgate Road, High Labour Olga, CM50EA. Before proceeding into our objection comments, we wish to firstly confirm we're pleased that many of our objections have been acknowledged. Notwithstanding, the Parish Council have given careful consideration to the proposal and have the following comments. This application forms part of the Greenbelt development, which has been allowed to grow over a number of years. The application may appear as a nature conservation project, but in our view, it is an extension to the garden with further encroachment into Greenbelt land. In our view, the trees and landscaping officer's valid report has not been taken into consideration. Our objections should be taken on board by the subcommittee making the decision. The buildings over time have been repositioned and amended. This has caused confusion with misaligned drawings and misaligned plans being presented to the committee. We suggest the FPC review the earlier plans, reference EPF 1355-22, which shows substantial greenbelt land, and then compare these earlier plans with the current plans. We also suggest a contamination report is required, as there will be seepage into the pond from the waste that is imported onto the site. Poisonous and polluting substances could have an effect on wildlife in and around the proposed pond. In our view, the wildlife pond is being created to provide a camouflage for a substantial drainage system. An actual drainage design has not been approved. The plans show tennis courts which have not been granted. These should not be shown on the drawings. Misrepresentations within the drawings cause confusion on what has and has not been granted permission. In our view, planning reference EPF 2883-22 represents a change of the use of the agricultural land within its curtilage to residential and domestic purpose. The Parish Council considers this to be an inappropriate development in terms of the greenbelt and compounds the loss of openness, for which no case of any special circumstances have been provided. If the District Council decides to grant permission, then in our view, permitted development rights should be removed. This concludes our objection comments in relation to planning reference EPF 2883-22. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next person is the agent, Danny Simmons, in person. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, committee. I'm Danny Simmons from RPS, and I'm the agent acting for the applicant. Committee, this is a very simple application. It's for the construction of a natural pond, and this is the application that's before you this evening. The pond is being developed with a view to enhancing the wildlife and ecological value of the area. And importantly, the proposals will include a comprehensive landscaping scheme, whilst at the same time the pond will be integrated into the surface water drainage system. The site is in the Greenbelt. However, as confirmed by your planning officer this evening, the pond represents appropriate development in the Greenbelt. For the avoidance of doubt, the proposals do not include any structures or hard surfaced areas. Accordingly, there will be no impact upon the openness of the Greenbelt. Rather, the proposals will bring forward significant benefits by enhancing the visual amenities of the Greenbelt and by securing significant biodiversity enhancement and also by improving drainage. With respect, committee, this application should not be before you this evening. As with previous applications at Tilegate, the committee determination has been instigated by one objector. And ironically, the objector is not even a close neighbour, but one who clearly is able to influence the parish council. Again, with respect, most of the points that are being raised by the objector and the parish council this evening have nothing to do with this application and are simply not relevant to your determination this evening. As I advised this committee when I spoke last year, objections relating to proposals on and adjoining the Tilegate site are fuelled by a personal vendetta against my client. I've heard what the objector has said this evening, but it is clear from everything that has gone on over the last few years that it is indeed a personal vendetta. The unfortunate and unreasonable behaviour of both this one objector and the parish council should not detract from the merits of this application proposal. And just to add, again, in response to comments that are made,
in relation to conditions and also contamination, they are simply untrue. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Questions from members? Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman, and thanks to the officer for a clear presentation of this. I'm really pleased to see the conditions that are on this. I think there are a number here that are very important that we do highlight. Very pleased to see condition 5, which is the no soil earthworks being imported or exported. I think that is a critical one because it's very easy. And I speak as somebody who lives in Thaden Boyce and made a small issue for the golf course there. Also very pleased to see condition 8, which restricts the use of that pond and stops it being, as the parish council is worried about becoming part of the residential curtilage. That's very clearly ruled out here. Looking at the diagrams, though, I do see that there's a significant movement of earth, maybe not significantly altering the levels overall, but to actually achieve that, there's going to be quite a lot of earth moved around. Given that this is going to be a wildlife pond, and given that it therefore was integrated into surface drainage, I do think it would probably be useful to at least have a level 1 contamination examination of the area to make sure that we're not creating a pond, unfortunately like those ones on Blunt's Farm, which ended up actually going blue, but not a nice blue. And that was shortly before they went green, then black. I think that's something that's, for the purposes of the green belt, we should be trying to avoid. So I would like to see a contamination condition added to this. But apart from that, I think this is a perfectly sensible thing to do. We have seen pond applications at this committee before. Gives us a chance to look at it properly. The ability as well not to have any surfaces constructed in there, I think is clearly important for the green belt. So I would like to commend the officers on the conditions they put in, but I would like to see a contamination one as well, please.
Can that be added quite easily, Mr. Courtney? Yep. Okay. Anybody else? Councillor Bedford.
Yeah, I'm happy to second that proposal. I think that's a sensible course of action to take. And our focus tonight should be purely around, as the officers said, around the area of the pond itself. Obviously, biodiversity now is becoming a major project for any development that's going forward, whether it be for green roofs or, as in this case, for trying to encourage wildlife in ponds, etc. I can only think that it's actually, in the setting of the green belt, it's actually going to enhance the green belt, bring further birds and fish to the area, and that's exactly what we're trying to do by bringing forward biodiversity issues. I'm happy to support that proposal going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Janet Whitehouse.
Thank you. It may be a fairly minor point, but I'm not happy that the applicant didn't bother to put in the details that the tree officer was asking for. I know it's gone into conditions, but if the applicant can't be bothered to put in those details in order to obtain a planning application, I think it's very unlikely that it's going to be taken account of under the conditions.
Any other councillors? Well, I'll just add a tiny bit there. I think, oh, sorry. Yes, we'll do that in a minute, yeah. Yep. I was just going to say, just going to ask Mr. Courtney, re one of the questions that the parish council asked. I don't really understand what they asked, and I'm just asking you. They asked that if we're minded to pass this, that all permitted development rights be removed. There wouldn't be any permitted development rights with a pond, would there? Or can I just ask you?
Not really. I mean, there are some general permitted development rights that are open to everybody. Which would be things like the construction of fences, etc. But yeah, as Councillor Phillips pointed out, obviously we have got condition 6, which actually restricts any built development on here. Okay. That would really be the only things that they could do. I think the parish council were kind of suggesting that we could potentially remove permitted development rights from the houses, but obviously they're outside the application site, so there would be no legal way of doing that anyway, even if we decided that was appropriate.
So I think the concern about whether any chemicals could leach out of the bund into the water, I think that sounds quite relevant. So I think, can we just vote on whether we could add another condition there? Because we've had a proposal and we've had a seconder. We vote
For a level 1
for a
contamination
level 1 contamination report.
Sorry, before we go to the vote, phase one contamination report in itself, it's not useless, but it's the problem is if you do a phase 1 and it reveals that there is significant contamination, you need the phase 2 and the remediation. Otherwise, all we're saying is they'll say, oh yeah, this is hugely contaminated, but then we're not requiring them to do anything about it. So it would be the standard contamination. If at phase 1 something is found, then you move on to phase 2, and basically, but if nothing's found or if it's not relevant to do it, then yeah.
Right, so can we
Chairman,
vote on...
effectively it's a standard contamination approach.
Standard. Yeah. So are we happy to, are people happy to agree to that? Could we have a vote on that, please? Show of hands. Thank you.
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you. So with that added to the conditions, we'll go to the proper vote now. So those in favour, please show.
14-4.
And against?
13-4 then, and 2 against.
And any abstentions? No. So that has been passed then. Thank you very much.
Chairman, if I may, Danny has accused me of lying. I passed to Danny a letter that I have from the applicant saying that he apologising for not abiding by conditions. So I'm looking for Danny, I'm looking across to him and asking him to withdraw that statement. He's got the letter in front of him from the applicant saying...
Sorry. So, can we close the meeting now? So, close the meeting at 7:47. Thank you.